Good morning, everyone. My name is Santhi, and I'd like to thank the organizers of the KL Startup Summit 2021, especially Adeline Chin from Law Asia 365 and Josh Lee from Alita for inviting me to speak at the opening of the Legal Tech track today. It's a privilege to be here. Let me start this talk by speaking about my first exposure to legal tech. In 2018, when I was the Director of Continuing Professional Development at the Malaysian Bar, I traveled to Singapore to attend my first ever legal hackathon. Organized by the Singapore Academy of Law, this was actually my first foray into the area. At this event, on the first day, surrounded by the organizers, by legal and non-legal innovators, I came away with my mind blown. I could not sleep. And my brain was filled with possibilities or what would lie in the future and what was already available to us now. That night, I wrote a proposal for the then president of the Malaysian Bar to set up what would become the Innovation and Future of Law Committee within the Malaysian Bar, with the goal to actually enable legal tech to find its footing for the benefit of members of the Malaysian Bar. Since that time, I have continued with my interest in legal technology, and I'm very, very excited to be here today. So, in preparation for this session, the key question that needs to be asked by me, for me, is why is legal tech important? So let's talk about the why. Why is there a pressing need for transformation? Let me start by talking about the obvious, the pandemic, which on the one hand has wrought havoc the world over, but it has also entrenched the perspective that technology is our enabler. And yet, even today, people still ask the question of whether technology is our friend or whether it's our foe. Going on, the second why focuses on legal services and the use of tech tools to enhance the provision of legal services. I think we need to individually and collectively understand that the times they are changing, as Robert Zimmerman, or as we know him, Bob Dylan, would actually say. Now, the impact of this can be seen in 4 areas. First, the changes in client and customer behavior. Second, the fact that there is a greater demand for speed, value, and flexibility. Third, increased cost pressures, and we see this particularly with reference to firms and legal service providers. And fourth, direct and indirect competition from new law and alternative legal service providers. So the question that we ask is, can we provide legal services to meet these disruptive standards? Moving on, next, we will have to understand key business trends that may change how legal services are provided. Now, first, again, the demand for 24/7 access to legal services. You know this. When we talk to clients, they always want something from us yesterday. Second, the increased use of legal insourcing. So organizations are now subscribing directly to tech tools that enable them to work faster and cheaper, and sometimes they do this to the exclusion of legal service providers and law firms. Third, cybersecurity. All organizations, including law firms, need to know that their internal cybersecurity policies are ready. The question to you today is, are we ready? Moving on from there, let's talk for a minute about the key global trends. Did you know that 7 out of 10 firms, top firms globally in market capitalization in 2019 were tech firms that were disrupting every industry? That means that the legal industry is not immune. So you need to ask yourself, if you are a legal service provider or a law firm, are you in control? The good news, tech is already reshaping how business is conducted. What this means is there will be new legal issues that will become prevalent over time. Privacy, competition law, ethics. There is so much potential that lies ahead in regard to the new demand for legal services. From there, let's talk about COVID again. Now, with COVID, we know that remote working may become, in fact, has become the norm. And with that, digitalization will impact on the provision of legal services. Note that unlike digitization, digitalization is about building new and innovative ecosystems. I know that some people in the audience are already involved in doing this, and my congratulations to you. But now we all need to come together to do this cohesively. Did you know that the big 4 professional service firms collectively have about 10,000 lawyers globally? And the question that we need to ask is, how does this impact us? How do we compete? How should we compete? Should we even compete at all? Now, in preparing for this talk, I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I'd like to ask you to think for a minute. Remember that when we talk about legal tech, there are 2 sides to the coin. On the one side, we have the let's do it people who are driving this with innovation, excitement, enthusiasm, and lots of money. On the other side, we have the naysayers. So I'm going to try and simplify this a little bit for you by talking about the huge pluses that can occur with the adoption of legal tech. The first of this is simplifying the law and legal communications. Countries like the United Kingdom have already started this journey, and the goal is to democratize legal information. Second, let's talk about access to learning, specifically access to learning the law. Now, if we do this correctly, it will become more inclusive, which means a reduction in the cost of education. It will become more diverse, and potentially, and interestingly, it might actually remove the gatekeeping culture that currently exists in some jurisdictions. And third, it is also about accessibility. It is about providing access to justice for all. It is about reaching unreachable. Now, from here, let's move to what? So, what should we prepare for? Here are some considerations. Now, this list is not meant to be exhaustive, but it's meant to indicate things that we should be thinking about, again, as a unit. First, let's talk a little bit about increased client expectations. Now, I've already mentioned that earlier. There is on-demand legal services that we have to deliver now that have to be accessible anywhere, anytime, every time. Second, we also have to recognize that insourcing is real. In-house legal departments are now looking inward. They are developing and using their own tech tools to save time, to save costs, and to keep information confidential. Third, the reality is that all of this is impacting on law firms and legal service providers. This results in reduced work faster for less. And finally, cybersecurity. Now, this is real. Law firms will actually need to show that their client-sensitive data, whether it's stored on in-house servers or the cloud, is actually secure. Now, moving on from there, I'd like to take a minute to talk about risk. Now, when we talk about risk, the question that we need to ask is, what are the risks if we all move forward individually without the creation of a legal innovation strategy? Now, there are 4 things that I would like to highlight here. The first, and I think we're already seeing this, is haphazard development. Everybody's doing their own thing. Sometimes, second, there is duplication. So you may have multiple vendors or innovators who are developing products that are similar. And sometimes these legal tech solutions may not be operable because, in essence, the creators or innovators don't necessarily understand the problems that need solving. The third issue, of course, is that legal service providers are at a loss. They don't know where to start. They don't know what to use. They don't know how much to spend. They don't know how much it's going to cost. They don't know about training. They don't know about longevity. So these are factors that need to be taken into account and should form a fundamental part of a legal innovation strategy. And last but not least, regulatory backlash. I think that it is essential when we do this that the vendors, the innovators, the funders, everybody come together to actually engage with regulators. So what is the lesson in all of this? The lesson in all of this is we can't be like the dog chasing its tail. What we need to be able to do this purposefully. So what can we do? Now, the question that comes to mind for me always is who should come first? I find that when we put the user first, recognize their limitations, their challenges, and their needs, this will actually allow us to create fast and accessible solutions. So what can we do? Well, from what I've already read, we recognize that there is already baseline tech in place. So things like Microsoft Office, Zoom, Skype, these are the norm. And there is an assumption that everybody has access to this. Now, when we talk about back-end tech, this is basically the administration of a law firm or a business. And we have to consider whether smaller firms and companies are equipped, whether they have the funds and resources for hardware and software and people in order to be able to use these back-end tech. The third, enabling tech. I like enabling tech. This usually tends to drive innovation and is often results in radical change to the capabilities of users and also to the industry in general. And the last, front-end tech. Now, front-end tech essentially is about putting the customer or the client first. Now, I'm going to take a moment, because of where I am from, to talk to you about Rajah and Tann Technologies. So please bear with me as I just highlight Rajah and Tann Technologies, which is part of the Rajah and Tann Asia network, also has over time been creating a series of tech tools that we hope will be usable by our clients and customers, by our lawyers within our own law firms, and by the legal industry in general. These include things like Loophole, Legal Comet, Novus Demia, which the academy that I am the dean of actually uses, Contract Arc, cybersecurity training, and of course, Ready Docs. Now, please reach out to me if you would like to know more about these products, and I'll connect you to the right people. Next, do you see the ostrich with its head in the sand? Well, the idea of the ostrich with the head in the sand is actually a myth. And the visual, I think, however, reflects nicely the perspectives that some stakeholders take. So the question is, who is responsible, not legal tech per se, but for transformation in the legal industry? Now, when we look at this, I look at it from a perspective of who and how. And when we think about this, we need to ask who and how are we to be involved in the building of the ecosystem that enables innovation. I've divided this into two categories. First, the people, and second, the processes. And for me, there are 5 key stakeholders. First, the government, who will be responsible to enact contemporary legislation, to provide funding, to support law firms to upgrade or update or innovate. And to my mind, Singapore has been exceptional on this and largely ahead of the curve. The Ministry of Law, the Judiciary, the Law Society of Singapore, and related organizations clearly have an agenda for this. Second, let's talk about the judiciary. For example, the judiciary in Malaysia has been spearheading innovation since 2007, and I'll speak about it in a minute. Third, the regulators. Now, what is the responsibility of regulators in terms of building this innovative ecosystem? Well, they need to start by identifying and specifying the relevant regulations in relation to the adoption and use of legal tech. And because they themselves are not legal experts, they will actually need to connect with tech experts, create frameworks for screening of potential legal tech products and vendors. And I think the best way to do this probably would be through a legal tech sandbox. And in Malaysia, this is part of the Malaysian Bar Council plan for the future. The fourth stakeholder would be law firms and legal service providers. Now, here's where it gets a little bit tricky. They need to be able to review existing tech tools, evaluate utility and cost, adopt guidelines, be able to provide cybersecurity education, and track adoption of tech by all staff. Now, here's an interesting point. if you speak to law firms, and particularly the smaller law firms, they actually have to deal with issues like buying tech or subscribing to tech and not using it or not being able to use it because they don't know how. And linked to that is the prospect that sometimes when you subscribe to tech, the people who are supposed to be using it, the business professionals within the firm, are not necessarily able to use it. So they discard it, put it aside, and stay same old, same old. You know why? Because that's safe. And the last stakeholder, but to my mind, probably the most important stakeholder in all of this, are educational institutions. Imagine the day when all law schools will have mandatory courses in technology, legal technology, innovation, design thinking for future lawyers. This will ultimately allow us to emphasize the client first and to stay true to the essence of legal services. Now, moving on from there, let's take a minute to talk about Malaysia. And why are we talking about Malaysia? Because I am Malaysian. Let's talk about the judiciary in Malaysia and what they've been up to. They started this journey in 2007 with an e-filing system, which allows for case management, queue management, court recording, and transcripts. And then we waited another decade before they rolled out e-lelong. E-lelong is an online platform public auction. December 2017, we have e-review, which is for case management of cases. In 2020, they've been really busy, as you can see, with e-jamin that enables bailors to post bail through their app. E-hearings, where you can conduct hearings or cases online. QR code authentication for all court documents, which I think is pretty fundamental. And more recently, e-appellate, which is a document reference system for the conduct of all court matters at appellate level. Moving on from there, let's talk about the next question. And what is the next question? It is how. So I think that events like this, so thoughtfully organized, are ultimately about the people. And if you look at the Alita toolkit, which I encourage you to read, by the way, it says, without coordination between government agencies, courts, and not-profit motivated organizations, there are limits to economically sustainable solutions that can target access to justice issues. Now, I'd like to pause for a minute to ask you to think about that. So what is this about in essence? It is about communication. And so this event is a wonderful way to communicate, network, and understand what everybody is up to. Moving on from there, I'd like to share this gorgeous graphic, which you will find in the Alita Legal Innovation Strategy Toolkit. Now, what this does is it highlights the key enablers that would be involved in the development and implementation of legal tech. I think that the information here would be useful to everyone because we all fit into this somewhere here. Now, moving on from there, I'm very, very conscious about time. So the last thing that I have to say today is about when. For all of us, particularly for those who are standing on the fringes, this must be the most important question. When? What is the answer? The answer is now. And why is the answer now? The answer is now because whatever got us here will not get us there. And this is where we are right now, at the cusp of really radicalizing and moving legal tech forward. Not individually, not as individual separate entities that don't know what each other is doing, but by coming together as a cohesive, collaborative unit with open doors to communication, with a solid understanding of what the journey should be. So this is about creating a framework. As I wrap up, I would like, because I am a teacher first and foremost, to give you access to two excellent Alita publications. If you pop out your handphones now, you will be able to scan the QR codes for two documents. The first, Alita's Solia Report 2020. It's over 212 pages, but worth the read. And it covers so many countries and its considerations. And there's some really valuable information there. The second document, and I strongly recommend if you're serious about legal innovation in the legal industry, to actually look at the strategy toolkit. It's pretty awesome. And finally, let's move on. I hope that the sharing that I've provided today has been useful. I wish you a productive and thought-provoking day ahead. And if you'd like to be in touch, pop out your handphones again and scan that code, because that's how you will be in touch with me. I would be delighted to hear from you. And I'd like to say thank you and wish everyone a wonderful rest of the day.